Hey, what's going on everyone? This is MiraObviously. Today I'm going to be talking about the differences between doing Diurnal Sect and Neutral Sect, mainly in endgame content such as Savage or Dungeons, and speaking if you're obviously level 80. So I'm going to start off talking about Astro in Dungeons. If you look down at my abilities, I am running Diurnal instead of Nocturnal. I personally think Diurnal is a lot better than Nocturnal in Dungeons because of your capabilities of just popping a lot of regens on the tank as they're tanking everything. You just run up to the tank and pop Collective, use Celestial Opposition, and place your Earthly Star on the mob, and you're able to just keep spamming Gravity on the mob or Malefic if you're down to at least 2. Also, we can't forget about Celestial Intersect, which I think is one of Astro's most OP abilities outside of Neutral Sect, because not only is it free, it's an off global, and it has a very short cooldown of 30 seconds, so you know, if you're in Diurnal, that's basically a shield that you don't have to heal, or if you're in Nocturnal, that's a regen that you'd be able to use on the tank. Also, as the tank keeps pulling big, you can use Aspected Benefic and Diurnal to give them a regen, but I'd probably be a little bit careful about this one because there's a lot of tanks that don't like having to run towards the healer, because most of the times tanks are face pulling, and if it's a big mob, there's a possibility as they're running through that that you're gonna pull hate from them just because of your regen taking in. Some tanks are just gonna be like, oh my god, and then go back to just to pull off of you. But again, this is very minute, but you know, Aspected Benefic with Collective, Celestial, Earthly Star, and just on the tank while you're attacking the mob, that's a lot of healing, so you don't really have to cast GCD heals on them, and it makes you, I don't want to say makes you look like an OP healer, but it looks pretty cool when the healer just contributes to the damage and the tank is cozy and they're not nearly close to dying. But that doesn't mean Nocturnal Sect is a bad stance either, because you could just throw an Aspected Benefic shield on the tank, and that's a pretty good shield. If they have a lot of ads on them, they probably won't break through the barrier for a while. You could also just spam Collective and Celestial Opposition and give them a shield with some mitigation, but I just like regen better because it ticks for a while and it just tops them off versus your mitigation. You know, they're still dying. I mean, you could still use Celestial Intersect for that regen, and you know, don't forget we also have Essential Dignity, which I like to call mini bennies, and you got 2 of them. So both of them are viable in Dungeons. I personally don't have a preference, but just remember that when you're in Nocturnal Sect, your Aspected Benefic does cost 300 more MP, because in Nocturnal it costs 700 and in Diurnal it costs 400. So next, I want to talk about stances in Savage content, you know, raids and stuff. This one's going to be a lot more important than the Dungeons, because you know, with Dungeons, if you're max eye level, you're basically gear carrying the the run, and you don't have to worry as much about taking as much damage. If your tanks are pretty OP or you having good gear, you're able to heal the discrepancy if they're very low. So obviously it's super important that healers do not duplicate jobs. I mean, that goes without saying. So normally the normal comps are going to be Scholar and Astro, or Astro and White Mage, and obviously White Mage and Scholar, but I'm going to be talking about Astro being a combination with either of the 2. So we're used to seeing, you know, a regen healer and a shield healer. Okay, so we don't necessarily always need both, because one of the big things in this game is that the only people who are going to be taking damage the whole time is going to be the tank in raids, with your exception of raid-wide damage, or you know, people just messing up mechanics and not getting out of the bad, and you're going to have to go out of your way to heal them. So really, you only have to pay attention to the tank who's getting autoed, And autos are very important in this game. A lot of people take it lightly. It's like, example, your tank has about 110k HP, 120. That's actually probably way more than that. Anyways, the point is, the bosses usually auto them for like 30k to 40k. Like Shiva from last tier, she autoed the tanks for like 30 something k, and if it crit, it was like 40k. So you really have to be careful and pay attention to their HP bar and make sure they're not dying. So, you know, slap on essential dignities on them. You know, if you have a scholar as your buddy, they're gonna use the fairy tether or an asylum. Sometimes using an asylum on just a tank is not necessarily a bad idea, because it's better to use your off globals and sit on them. Asylum is it has a short cooldown. Okay, but I'm starting to get carried away with the different job, but the concept is still the same. Your off globals, especially on Astro, they're very short, and this is the one thing that I really like about Astro. Celestial, Collective, and Earthly Star are all 1 minute. That's really short, because most Savage fights are about 9 to 12 minutes long or more, depending, you know, things always change. So that's basically 12 times you can use each one. If you sit on your off globals and you don't use them for a whole minute, you basically wasted your, you know, your potential and using it and healing somebody. While there might seem, you know, you don't want to say, oh, they're healthy, so I'm not gonna use my off globals. No, you know, don't be afraid to use it on them, because that's just less healing you have to do. And you know, and I mentioned before, always be casting. If you're not healing, you know, you should be DPSing. So yeah, don't be afraid to use your off globals whenever you can, especially when you're learning the fight, because you want to experiment whenever you can. Just use it, just use it and see, okay, there was no raid-wide damage happening for a whole minute, and you might have it back. And then the raid-wide damage may happen a couple seconds later, and then it's alright to hold it just for a few seconds, to be like, alright, I'm gonna wait for this raid-wide to go off, and then I'm gonna use Celestial and Collective. As an Astro, I wouldn't recommend using them both immediately, but that depends. It'll be easier for me to explain it to you when I make the VOD for E9 as an example, because there is an initial AoE followed by either pairs first or clocks, and that's 2 raid wides coming up right one after the other. But getting back to the stances, usually when you're in regen, it is a reactive OGCD, versus in Nocturnal it is a preemptive OGCD. Because in Diurnal, obviously you wait for the AoE to go off, and then you pop either Collective or Celestial or both to top people off. And then you could just calmly start DPSing away while the regens do their thing, and you not having to GCD heal. You can use either or, but I would probably like to use Collective first, as it's a bubble, and make sure if everybody has to do a stack mechanic, that would be a good opportunity to just pop Collective and then giving people the regen. And remember, you just want to use it for the regen, you don't want to sit in it as a shield. You can, if there is some sort of transition in a boss where everybody gathers up and you have to like shield up, and since you're not in Nocturnal, you can use that and sit in it to give people the mitigation. But the reason why I like Diurnal, and I think Diurnal is better in Savage as well, is because most of the times there isn't an instance when a raid-wide AoE will kill you if there is no mitigation. Because, you know, you're not the only one with mitigation. The tank can use Reprisal or Dark Missionary, you know, and the other 2 tanks mitigation stuff, plus anything Tactician, Samba. Your team can contribute as well. And also, as I mentioned, after the raid wide goes off and you pop your regens, you can just sit there and just keep spamming Malefic and then just DPS the boss and help out with killing it. Also, I mean, You also have another healer that can help out. Whispering Dawn, Soil has a regen also at level 80, and White Mage has a size and Asylum. Those abilities combined with yours, that's a lot of healing. So both of you can start DPSing the boss and just let the regens tick, because there might not be another raid wide AoE for a good while. Versus if you're in Nocturnal stance and you pop Celestial Opposition or Collective as a shield, they're going to take a lot of damage. I mean, it's obviously going to be a lot less than if you were in Diurnal because you have more mitigation, but the boss, but your party is going to be hurt, and the regen has to come somewhere. If Asylum might not be enough in time for the next AoE, so one of you may have to GCD heals, whether it's going to be you or the White Mage or the Scholar, and it sucks. But it is what it is. And remember, I'm talking about min-max healing, which is you healing as little as possible and DPSing as much as you can. You can play safe and heal a lot more. Healer DPS isn't gonna be what's like, oh man, since the healer didn't DPS, we couldn't meet the enrage. Well, I mean, that can help. That can happen. Don't get me wrong, but it's not gonna be a lot. Your team would have to be super low for that to be an issue. And for whatever reason, if you're in Diurnal and there is this raid wide that's devastating, you have your amazing oh shit button that's called Neutral Sect, that increases your potency and your raid wide healing. But yeah, that's pretty much it, all I had to say. Again, guys, thanks for watching. Feel free to let me know if you wanted me to cover something else, or else I'm just gonna be, see what I can think about and expect my VODs.